This is Newsline. I'm Michael Chagani. Tonight, longtime politician Audrey Yu, who says she may not run again for a Legislative Council seat. Now, thank you, Audrey Yu, with the Civic Party. Just before the cameras rolled, I asked you whether you were running again, because I remember reading that you won't run again, and you said no final decision has been taken on that. It seems like you're not going to run again. Why?
Well, the Civic Party is still in the process of going through, possible candidates, and we have to go through the members' meeting and so on, and there has been no final decision made yet.
You think you will stick around for another 5 years, 4 years in LegCo?
Well, I've always said when I formed the party, the Civic Party in 2006, that the main reason is that we need to have a platform so new bloods can join. And in fact, in the 2008 LegCo election, I put myself second on the list after Tanya, who's
That's
of course
correct.
a complete newcomer. And it's very important that we have to have legislators who are prepared to do that, because then if you always want to keep on running and
you're shutting out the other people.
Because it's really very, very difficult.
But I distinctly read some papers saying you weren't going to run because of just exactly what you said about bringing in new blood.
Yeah,
and so on.
I'm always keen on trying my best to bring in new blood,
So,
and
well,
it's something that we have to discuss, very seriously amongst the party.
I guess we'll take it that you likely won't run. But then, we'll have to wait and see. But a lot of people are not running this time in September. And some of them, one of them is David Lee, the banker, representative bank. And I read him say that he was sick of politics. He wished he'd never entered it. Do you find the political scene in Hong Kong really changing a lot?
Yes, it is definitely changing.
Tell us how.
And it's very difficult if you want to maintain a rational sort of approach and stick to principles, because you find that nowadays, it's more and more to the two extremes, and the government is very often intransigent. And in order to move things or change things, you really need to push so hard that sometimes, people get tired and say, well, let's go to the extreme, because otherwise the government won't listen anyway. It's a sort of, violence of the system. So that kind of attitude of the government also, in fact, brings about very strong opposition
but,
that can adopt, very severe and very harsh tactics, and that makes it very difficult if you want to maintain a rational approach.
But C.Y. Leung, our incoming chief executive, Leung Chun-ying, will turn your argument around and says that you're stopping him from doing things. Your party and the Democratic Party, they're stopping. You guys are stopping him. He wants to work with you guys, and he puts out a restructuring plan, and you're obstructing it. That's what he's saying.
Well, in fact, if you look at C.Y. Leung's style so far since being elected, you will see that he is in the news every day. It's like a man who wants to go boxing in the ring, front line, front row, more than once a day. And I'm not sure that is sustainable, because as a chief executive, to a certain extent, or incoming chief executive, you to a certain extent, you have to be working with all sides. But you see that that's not his approach. He goes on the attack all the time.
Tell us how. How is he attacking you?
Well, I think, he takes this line that anybody who does not agree with him then necessarily is on the opposition. But sometimes, any man cannot be right all the time. Sometimes you can be wrong. And also the role of the legislature basically is, follow due process, look at things with a critical eye. You do not act as a rubber stamp. Now, C.Y. Leung's restructuring plan actually is put forward as a queue jumper, because basically we have all these things lined up with the current administration.
In the Legislative Council.
And you can understand, when you are going to the end of the term, every government does that.
Sure.
They pile you with all these things. We have something like 17 bills to go through, and we have.
He wants his government restructuring plan to take priority.
Yeah, we have very important things like, legislation on first-hand sales, and already boom, 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 boom. We're having meetings all the time, and sometimes 3 meetings in the same slot. And CY Leung comes along and says, well, I want to jump the queue. Mine's most important. Deal with it first. And we say, well, what about consultation? You know, something like 3 months consultation. And he says, no, you know, I am now in charge.
But to be fair, he said that the things that he wants to do, you know, you guys have consulted before, ministries or departments or bureaus back to roughly what they were before.
No, that's not true. But anyway, I think some people use the analogy and say, well, you know, I mean, if he is now going to the kitchen and he wants these ingredients, then in order to allow him, you know, to cook the meal, you have to give him what he wants. And my analogy is, okay, but what is he cooking? I mean, if he says, I am, you know, cooking you this dish which is normally served in a fast food and cost, you know, $30 or $40, then and he asks for $300. You know, the thing is, when you look at the principal secretaries we now have, we have three: the Secretary for Justice, the Chief Secretary, and also the Financial Secretary. And he says, well, underneath the Financial Secretary and the Chief Secretary, I want to increase the principals. I want to add 2 more secretaries. And their salary is more or less the same as the Chief Secretary and the Financial Secretary.
It's about over $300,000 a month.
It's about 1% difference from the salary.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. And so basically he's doubling. You know, he's doubling the post of the Chief Secretary and also the Financial Secretary. And we are entitled to ask, well, what are you delivering? You know, if you ask for double the money, I'm doing the same kind of work, or are you doing to do some different
double
work?
the work?
And he says, well, you know, we want to do long-term plans. Normally, you know, when the government is studying long-term plans, they normally, for example, hire a consultant who do a study, and then we have a consultation and so on. Do you really need, you know,
but he's
doubling
going to take office on July the 1st. He wants to get it all in place so he can start fresh.
Well, and in doing so, he says basically the current administration is so bad, with the current structure is so bad, that they would not be able to deal with the economy, would not be able to build public housing, would not be able to deal with old age, you know, fruit money and so on. I mean, and you probably will query it and say, okay, well, the present administration is not very efficient, but is it so
bad? Is it
bad,
really that bad?
That you can't do any work unless you have, you know, 57 more posts, and that does not include political assistance.
Sure. So you talk about over $70 million additional money. But, you know, I want to bring back 2 points. You mentioned 2 things which I find rather intriguing. You said CY Leung wants this because he's giving the impression that he's now the new boss, and this is what he wants, number one. And the other thing you said, and I'm paraphrasing, was that nobody can be right all the time. Are you suggesting that CY Leung, our new chief executive, feels he's right all the time, and that because he's the new chief executive, he must get his way? Because that suggests to me is very dictatorial.
Well, I can only say that, you know, since his election, you can see that every day he is in the news more than once, commenting about everything else. That, I mean, with the greatest respect, is a bit risky, because, you know, he is constantly taking the stance that, well, people who do not agree with me is filibustering, has a political agenda, and you should not agree with him, you should agree with me, because I'm the only person who is really anxious about what people are anxious about. And you have to take into account the fact that LegCo's role, for example, is really there to supervise, to monitor, to control the purse strings, and our duty very often is to ask questions. And when, you know, there is all this agenda, this due process that we follow in LegCo, does it mean that if we follow the due procedure and we ask these questions, then this is a personal thing, and therefore we are obstructing a chief executive? But that's the line he's taking.
You know, a few days back he put an article in a number of Chinese language newspapers, essentially attacking Legislative Council for questioning his restructuring government plan. And he says, why are all these LegCo panels and subcommittees questioning it? This is a form of delaying tactic. It's a form of filibustering. He said that in an article, which was in several newspapers. Does that, you know, we've never seen this kind of a chief executive before. You said before he's even taken over, he's on the attack every day, right? Does that, you've been around a long time, does that frighten you? Or do you think it's good for the people of Hong Kong that you've got a go-getter and in-your-face guy?
It doesn't frighten me, but I'm not sure whether it's sustainable because, I mean, you know, there will come a time. I mean, he's still in, I think he's in his honeymoon period because
there's no honeymoon. There's no honeymoon.
He hasn't quite started yet. But first of all, I want to explain that, you know, when you look back, for example, with the Zhang administration, and when he tried to increase the number of political appointments, he actually had a period of consultation, in fact 4 months, and then it took some time before he appointed the political assistants and so on, and the deputy secretaries. Even that, you know, the public is still sort of very upset about it. Now with C.Y. Leung, he didn't actually go through that sort of public consultation. He said, well, I consulted people during my CE election campaign. I mean, a lot of Hong Kong people will say, but I didn't even have vote, you know, you didn't really consult me on that. But never mind. Now, the LegCo is going through the deputation hearing. We had something like over 300 something, 400 organizations and people writing in. We had the whole day of Saturday last week, and we have a whole day of Saturday, in fact, in this week, all with people coming to give views, and precisely because C.Y. Leung did not do a consultation, you can see, you know, many people coming. And the other thing is that our normal LegCo process, when the government wants to increase the number of positions, create new posts, this goes through, first of all, to the relevant panel. For example, if the government wants to create a new post dealing with home affairs, you know, something to do with culture, then it goes to the Home Affairs panel. Then if it's agreed in terms of policy and so on, the government has to justify, come up with a paper to say why the current system is inadequate. Then it goes through the establishment committee,
so
and then to the then to the financial committee. Now this is the usual process.
He doesn't want this.
So when you have, you know, 57 different posts in different areas, you can imagine the first thing you ought to do is to go through the relevant panel. It's the Home Affairs, the housing, the planning.
But he's not doing anything.
He's not doing that. He said, let's skip all that. And let's go, you know.
Let's give him what he wants.
Yeah, if you don't do it, then you're filibustering. I mean, what you see, due process is important, because if you say, well, this is so important, let's forget it, you can do that for everything else.
So you become then a rubber stamp legislative council.
Become a rubber stamp because it's government say so, because the government says, well, this is my priority, you have to do it, and forget due process, just do it, just jump the queue.
We'll pick it up after the break. Don't go away. See you soon.